Morning, everyone. I can see that everyone is slowly joining. You'll see that the meeting's being recorded. We're just waiting for people to connect to audio, but thank you all for being here. There'll be some buttons coming up saying this meeting will be recorded and that'll be live streamed on Facebook. So thank you all for being here. We're going to give it a couple of seconds for people to connect to audio, and then my colleague Noluvuyo Mjoli is going to open up the meeting.
Excuse me, Chair, sorry.
Over to you, Vuyo.
Thank you so much, Lily. As my colleague has mentioned, my name is Noluvuyo Mjoli. I am with the Southern African Liaison Office. So today marks 10 years since the resolution 275 was signed by the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights. So with the Commission having signed this resolution, today's dialogue aims to unveil a series of insightful experiences from varying speakers from different countries with their experiences with the LGBTQIA rights and the experiences for queer people. Thank you to the Constitutional Fund for helping us realize this dialogue, and we give a warm welcome to our speakers today. Can we kindly observe the Chatham House rules? So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll unmute, and then you can be brought up front to, yes, but without further ado, we can get the meeting starting.
Thank you so much, Noluvuyo, for those wonderful opening remarks, and welcome to everybody who've joined us online and on the Zoom platform. Today is a very important dialogue that is speaking on the measures to advance LGBTI rights in South Africa and the region. This discussion will focus in particular for the safety of LGBTIQ people and with refugees in particular. We have a wonderful panel who have individually done amazing work within the respective countries, the region, and the continent. We'll begin by starting with Thomas from the Fruit Basket, who works with migrants and asylum seekers and refugees living in South Africa. Thomas, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lucy, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. It is such an honor to be sharing this panel, especially with the Deputy Minister and also the amazing human rights defenders who have been fighting tirelessly to advance and to protect the rights of our marginalized community. My name is Thomas, and I'm the founder of the Fruit Basket, which is an organization that is advocating for the social inclusion, dignity and hope restoration, and also legal recognition of LGBTQI+ asylum seekers and refugees from the African continent that are seeking protection in South Africa. So the Fruit Basket offers quite a number of services to this marginalized community, which include safe housing. We offer skills development and training. We offer mental health support and refugee status determination process support. We also host solidarity spaces as a way to create, I guess, a home away from home experience from our community that is in a foreign country without anyone. So we try to create that family environment and a home away from home environment so that everybody can just have a sense of safety, family, and security. We also do advocacy. And the advocacy that we do looks like what I'm doing right now on this panel, where we advocate and I guess highlight and bring to the attention of people the challenges that the community that is served by the Fruit Basket faces on a daily basis. And I am also going to utilize my 7 minutes that I have to doing that advocacy, which is bringing to your attention the challenges that our community is facing every day. The biggest one being the lack of legal status. as an organization, we have always prioritized ensuring that the beneficiaries of our organization adhere to their responsibilities of presenting at the refugee reception centers for this refugee status determination process so that they can legalize their stay in the country. But the challenge then becomes people that have done this, that have presented to the refugee reception offices to start this process to legalize their stay in the country, have been stuck in this system for a very long time. As much as we have ensured that people have fulfilled their responsibilities, the onus then now remains with the Department of Home Affairs to then recognize these individuals that have also fulfilled their own responsibilities, to then recognize them and give them the legal status. These people or these individuals or these members of our community who are stuck in this asylum system are not given any form of documentation that then proves that they are in the process, and it leaves them to be seen as illegal immigrants. And what this means now is that they are unable to access healthcare. They are unable to access the basic services that they need to access in the country. They are not able to access healthcare and also safe housing and any other basic needs that they require to be able to survive in the country. It means that they are seen as illegal immigrants. They struggle every day with unlawful arrests, unlawful deportation, yeah, there's a whole lot of challenges that the community face because of not having the legal status in the country. And I guess this one I would like to bring to your attention, Deputy Minister. I'm happy that you are here because lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer refugee women are the most vulnerable in these situations. We have transgender women who are refugees who resort to sex work, survival sex work, and they are facing a whole lot of challenges every day. They are living in groups in abandoned buildings. They are living in groups in bushes and mountains. On our database, we have mountain girls, we have bush girls, we have abandoned building girls, because they cannot afford to rent houses where they can stay. As much as our organization offers safe housing for this community, unfortunately, we can only accommodate 16 individuals at a time. So this means we have to support these community members in the spaces where they are. We have to send support to them, be it food vouchers or whatever other support or skills development training to them whilst they are living in these unsafe areas. And their daily experiences are sexual harassment. Their daily experiences are physical abuse and extortion. We also have a situation where transgender refugee women are being harassed by other asylum seekers at refugee reception centers just because they look different, just because there is no physical protection or physical safety for our community in such spaces. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well to say, Deputy Minister, in the measures that you are putting in place right now, with the position, the new position that you hold now, please include LBQ refugee women because they are the most vulnerable at the moment. There's no safety, there's no protection for them whatsoever. And again, as I mentioned, that it is our priority as an organization to ensure that every member of our community, every single individual that reaches out to the fruit basket to ask for support We make sure that before they even speak about their rights in the country, they focus on their responsibility as a non-citizen, as a person that is seeking protection in South Africa. And that responsibility, the very first one that we prioritize, is ensuring that you fulfill your responsibility of going to the refugee reception office and start the refugee status determination process. And then after that, you can be able to start talking about the rights that you have in the country and all of the rights that you have that are being infringed upon. The lack of documentation, the lack of legal status has left our whole community vulnerable. Without the freedom of movement, without any protection, without safe housing, because if people are undocumented, if people have not yet been recognized by the South African government, it means that they are not able to work, they are not able to access employment, and they don't have an income. And unfortunately, also, as much as we give skills development and training to our community members, they are still vulnerable, because even if you don't have the right papers, but you have the skill, you cannot be able to even start even in an informal business, especially with the situation that is happening right now. There is Operation Chanela that is seeking to catch and detain and deport all of the people that are in the country illegally. But also we are sitting with a situation where people have taken the necessary measures, but still, even if one is in the process, they do not have any documentation to prove that they are in the process. There is a number that the Department of Home Affairs is giving people, which is written in pen. And that number, unfortunately, is not recognized by the police at roadblocks. When the police are doing their door-to-door raids, when the police are doing their random stop and searches in the streets, even if somebody takes out their document and says, this is the number to prove that I'm in the process, they are not being recognized. But again, my appeal is LBQ refugee women, they are the ones who are the most vulnerable, especially, I don't even know what this means, but especially the ones who are visibly queer, the ones who are visibly trans. They are harassed every day, they are abused every day, they are extorted every day. And I guess I will just also jump into the measures, because I need to leave before the meeting ends. To say that as an organization, we are here, we've put ourselves in that space where we are catering to our community, we are working as a referral system, and we are helping everybody that comes to our doors to say, I need support. When we don't have the resources to support an individual with whatever needs they may have, we then reach out to the partners that we've created over the years to say, hey, can you help us help this individual with this situation? And it has worked for us. And I guess I just want to call out to the South African government, to other civil society organizations, and to other human rights defenders to say, let's work together with organizations like the Fruit Basket. Let's come together and put our heads together. We have some very brilliant minds in our community, where when the world is looking at us, they are only seeing people who are here to take what belongs to South African citizens, or who are just here to burden the economy of the South Africa. But we have some very brilliant minds who have so much to contribute. If only these people could get, these individuals could get the legal status, they could be able to also contribute to the growth of the economy of the country. That's what people are here for also. Yes, to be able to live freely and to be themselves, free of persecution because of their sexual orientation and gender identity. But also, people have so much to contribute. If only the South African government, the Department of Home Affairs, could collaborate, could work with us as organizations who are doing this work, so we can be able to also say to them, hey, we are the ones with the lived experiences. We are the ones who know what's happening on the ground. Yes, the Constitution says what it says. Yes, it's beautiful on paper, but in reality, it is like this. And these are the ideas that we have to be able to change the experiences that we are facing daily. For example, we would benefit from an LGBT desk at refugee reception centers, because we are being put in the same spaces, in the same waiting areas with economic and religious and other refugees. These are the same people. People didn't only flee homophobic and transphobic laws from their countries. They also flee from homophobic and transphobic fellow citizens, fellow countrymen. And these are the same people that we are being put in the same environment with at the refugee reception centers. And I think everybody who works in the LGBT sector and everybody who also follows the news on what's happening, these situations never really end well for our community. Just last week, a transgender woman was ridiculed at a refugee reception center. People were surrounding her and calling each other to come and point and make fun of her and call her names. That situation could have ended badly. Somebody would follow her after she leaves the space or something. And I feel that there is a need for more protection for our community. There is a need for more safety measures to be put in place. And I think that coming together and putting our heads together, we can come up with a solution that will help the community. And I think my last point is to say that we all know and are all aware that the anti-rights movement is still displacing people and is going to continue displacing people. Most progressive laws that protect LGBT people, it is inevitable that African LGBT people will come to South Africa to seek protection. And when that happens, and when it is still happening, what are the measures that are in place right now to protect people when they come to South Africa, because they are homeless, they are hungry, they are not safe, they cannot even access even the most basic of services. Let us put measures in place to ensure that when our siblings arrive fleeing persecution, let them not be persecuted in South Africa as well, because the Constitution grants protection based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Unless that changes, unless it changes, the Constitution changes, it means African LGBT people will continue coming to South Africa to seek protection. But where is the protection? Let's put our heads together as human rights defenders, as organizations, and support this community. Because at this point, this has gone beyond organizations, small grassroots organizations like the Fruit Basket. This needs all of us to come together and say, hey, how do we put an end to this? We all have ideas of our own. As a community, in our safe houses, we sit together and we discuss, what can we do? And we have so many ideas. Let's work together. Reach out to us and we can share these ideas that we have with you, because we are the ones who are experiencing this abuse and this neglect. But that being said, I'm very grateful also that we have this country to run to. Things may not be working very well, but trust me, the community is grateful to have at least this country in the continent that is easy for them. Well, not very easy, but that is at least accessible. People don't need to go through crazy visa processes, don't need crazy amounts of money to be able to come to South Africa. But once they are here, what are the protective measures? What are the safety measures that are in place for this community? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for that wonderful input, and also reminding us of the lived experiences of migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees living in South Africa, and proposing practical ways forward. We will now be calling on our second speaker, which is Monica Tabengwa from the UNDP, and they are a policy specialist. Monica, over to you.
Thank you, Busi. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Hello to my fellow panelists. And so, as introduced, I work for UNDP as a policy specialist. So I work for a project called Inclusive Governance Initiative. And so we work with, the UN generally works with state entities. And so my discussion is going to be really around international treaties, international law, and how we can use some of these treaties and some of these declarations and agreements to honor our obligations to protect individuals from, especially LGBTI individuals, from violation, discrimination, and general human rights violation. It's particularly important, I think, as mentioned today, is the anniversary of Resolution 275. So I'll start from there. I'll start with Resolution 275 and just explain what it is and why it was necessary for it to be adopted when it was. So Resolution 275 is a resolution of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which was adopted in 2014 in Luanda. It really was a culmination of a lot of work by different activists from different countries, LGBTI, and the African Commission itself, upon really realizing the violations that my colleague has just gone through, mentioning, in every country, LGBTI people go through all kinds of violations. In many of our countries, about 28 countries in Africa criminalize same-sex conduct. And even in countries where it's not criminalized, people still go through violence, still are discriminated against, they are still excluded. And so with that in mind, and with some resistance in our countries, in the different countries, to include LGBTI persons in all the national processes, I think LGBTI activists felt the need to go to the regional human rights framework and seek some protection there. Because of course, all our countries are members of the UN and they have signed and ratified to be bound by the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which protects people against discrimination on any basis or any status whatsoever. And so having gone there, it became obvious that, to use a tool such as a resolution was probably the best way to start getting some recognition at the African Commission. And this resolution was drafted and indeed adopted in 2014. And mainly it focuses on violence and discrimination based on LGBTI persons' actual or imputed sexual orientation and gender identity. And that was deliberate. I think if you look at any country, I don't think there is going to be any government that's going to accept and say that it's okay for people to be violated or for people to be subjected to violence. And so it was a very obvious low-hanging fruit for activists to focus on. And I think at the time we felt that most countries or even the commissioners would have no real problem in affirming or in adopting this resolution. So it really affirms that violence and discrimination violates the rights to non-discrimination, equal protection, the right to life, and the freedoms from torture and other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. All of these, by the way, are guaranteed under the Charter. And it requires countries to ensure that human rights defenders and civil society organizations are working in an environment that is free of stigma, reprisals, or criminal prosecution because of their work on sexual orientation and gender identity. And it requires countries to enact and effectively implement laws prohibiting and punishing violence that target people on the basis of their real or imputed sexual orientation and gender identity. And it also asks countries to ensure that proper investigation and prosecution of prosecutors is done. And that there should be some kind of recourse or remedies available. Judicial processes should be there for victims. And so obviously this is important in light of what we know and what a lot of the information that we get from the different countries. The resolution is not the only declaration or resolution or law that we have to rely on as LGBTI persons. I think there are international human rights treaties that many countries have signed, mostly without even reservation, that we can use to enforce, to enforce the rights of LGBTI persons. And there are other processes that we can hold our countries accountable. One of those ways is, universal peer review. At the UN, as well as the African Commission, countries are expected to make reports on how they are implementing all of these international laws and regional laws. And LGBTI individuals, LGBTI groups can make shadow reports to ensure that when the reviews are taking place, the reviewers or the commissioners or the Human Rights Council, wherever it is, whether it's a treaty body committee, they have the information which covers the issues that are important to you. In particular, if we refer to Resolution 275, it will be basing on the violations, the violence that people go through every day. And so you make sure that this information reaches the committee or the council that is reviewing your country. And in that way, they can ask particular questions, informed questions of the country delegation, to just really so that this is basically monitoring, making sure that the country, first of all, the government knows that they can be exposed when there are violations, and they can be held to task. And so I think that's important. Something that we can rely on. I talked about 2014, which is when this resolution was passed. It's now 10 years. What has happened? And I believe there has been a lot of changes. In 2014, there were about 32 countries that criminalized, and we have seen some progress. We've seen many countries decriminalize. I think about 5 have decriminalized since 2014, which is progress in itself. And in some others, it's not just decriminalization. There's been more further steps to actually integrate or even pass more laws that are protective. If you take countries like Angola, for instance, Mauritius, they didn't only decriminalize, they put in more provisions that actually protect LGBTI persons from discrimination. And I think those are significant steps that need to be recognized and noted. And there are other ways that I see progress in different countries. I think there has been, you find in processes, for instance, in budgeting committees, in HIV committees, in different ways that LGBTI persons are included in the work in different countries. I think that is important. I think I should just mention that I think the way that we've decided to work as a project is, recognizing that that progress has been made. I think it's important. And that even in countries where it's difficult, there are always allies within those countries. The reason why the changes happened is because there are people who believe in human rights and equality for all. And so in those countries where you have, for instance, you have the judiciary that is independent, you have a judiciary that is willing to apply international human rights, you take advantage of that and use that and look within the legislative arm of government and work with parliamentarians. There are parliamentarians that are particularly open to championing the rights of LGBTI individuals, and work with those parliamentarians. Make sure that they have the right information and support them when they go to parliament. Give them the right information so that there is no misinformation. There is no, there's no way that they would represent something that you are not you're not particularly interested in working on. And even within governments, find those key points. Find those key points. I know that for a lot of countries, HIV has been the biggest way to get in, but there are different ways of working. I see recently that many countries are interested, for instance, in working on intersex issues. And governments are taking the initiative to kind of to do some work to recognize and make sure that there is inclusion of intersex issues. I think that's something that we can, all jump behind and support. And I think it's important that it's done right. It's not piecemeal. It's inclusive, and it recognizes all the intersectional ways that oppression is experienced. All rights are interdependent, so you can't go with one and leave one behind. And so we have to make sure that we use those opportunities when they arise to ensure that inclusion is done in the right way. I think the way we're also working is we are trying to promote partnerships. A lot of the work really that has been done for LGBTI issues is done by LGBTI activists and their organizations. And forming partnerships with these groups, I think it also allows for information to flow, for lessons to be learned. And as UNDP, we work with state, like I said, and so we do have an opportunity to bring states and NGOs together to be able to discuss. We recently had this event where we were commemorating the resolution 275 here in Johannesburg. And we brought together state entities, we brought together National Human Rights Institute, we brought together activists, CSO person, LGBTI activists, and the discussions were really good. And you could hear some of the frustrations which possibly governments didn't know about, the frustrations that governments have, and that's a learning process. And I think going forward, we are going to be able to develop something that can accommodate several views. And just, I think, hearing from the source is always important. Like hearing activists talk about how they experience or how their lived experience in the different countries, their frustrations working with the African Commission, their frustrations working in their governments, trying to enforce constitutions and so on and so forth. I think it makes a difference, in how you develop the solutions. And so, having these partnerships is very important for I think for our work going forward. Not only, we have a lot of similar experiences as a continent, as different countries, regardless of where you come from. And so working together, somebody ends up learning a lot. And of course, context is important. We all experience differently. And so I think that's one way of making sure that the solution that we bring, can actually bring as many people as possible. And I think that is important to note that, partnerships across the board. And I'm not just talking about, LGBTI activists. There are many other causes, like what we call mainstream NGOs that work on different rights. I think it is important to bring them along as well. Because like I said, we are all human beings, and we all experience all these hardships that everybody else does. It's just that LGBTI persons might have the added factor of the intolerance around sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex characteristics. And so working across movements, whether it's women's rights, disability rights, refugee rights, because there are LGBTI individuals in all of these movements. And so bringing them together and making sure that the issues are integrated. I think it's important. And making sure that all of this is put together and goes back to when the country is being reviewed. This information does come out. I think I will stop here and answer some of the questions when they come out. But just to say that, again, to buttress the point that I think it's important to celebrate this, even the smallest of successes. And there has been many, but we tend to focus on the bad things that happen. And I think it's important as well. But I think as well, we need to kind of really show that we have come a long way. We need to document all of these success stories so that people can learn from them. People can be encouraged as well to know that all the work that you're putting in, it's not in vain. It may take a long time. It does take a long time, but at the end of the day, there will be change, because change is inevitable. Yeah, I'll stop here now.
Thank you so much, Monica, for that wonderful input, and also reminding us about how to hold countries accountable within international bodies and also internally. I think that's an important aspect that we tend to miss sometimes as activists. Thank you for that. We'll now be calling on Idu Mekwe from Lambda, Mozambique. Zhao, are you ready? And Idu, are you both ready? We're going to have Idu's input with a translation. Are you both ready?
Yes.
Okay. You may start.
Bom dia a todos. Eu sou o Edu Meca e sou oficial do projeto na Lambda.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Edu Meki. I'm the official agent of... I didn't get the name again, Edu?
Edu Lambda.
Lambda, the project
Yeah.
Lambda.
Então, eu vou apresentar aqui panorama dos direitos LGBTs em Moçambique após a adoção da Resolução 275.
I'm going to present an overview of the LGBTQ rights in Mozambique after the resolution
275.
of the resolution 275.
Bom, alguns avanços que tivemos, começo aqui por referir à revisão do Código Penal em 2014, que foi exatamente no ano da aprovação da resolução.
So some of the improvements that Edu is going to talk about is on the criminal law revision that was made after this resolution, the 275 resolution.
Até 2014, nós ainda usávamos o Código Penal de 1886, que foi herdado do regime colonial português.
So up until 2014, they were still using the criminal law from the colonial times, from the 1800s.
E constavam disposições no Código Penal que criminalizavam as relações consentidas entre pessoas do mesmo sexo.
So that criminal law from the colonial times was still like prohibiting and criminalizing relationships of people from the same sex.
Então, exatamente em 2014, quando da aprovação da resolução, nós tivemos esta revisão do Código Penal e em 2015 as relações consentidas entre pessoas do mesmo sexo passou a ser descriminalizada.
So in 2014, there was the revision of the criminal law in Mozambique. And in 2015, now same-sex relationships were allowed.
E outro avanço que nós tivemos foi a aprovação do 5º Plano de Ação Nacional de Combate ao HIV-Sida 2021-2025.
So another advancement was in 2015, tá bem?
2021, 2025.
Você pode repetir essa? Eu não peguei o nome.
Ok, nós tivemos uma aprovação de um plano estratégico, e este plano dura de 2025, 2021 ou 2025. E neste plano incluem pessoas transgêneros e homens que têm sexo com outros homens como população-chave.
So there was an advancement, and a strategic advancement plan, also elaborated in Mozambique from 2021 to 2025.
Yeah.
And this plan also includes transgenders and men having relationships together, included in the plan. Yeah.
E igualmente tivemos, a partir do Ministério da Saúde, a aprovação de uma diretriz de atendimento à população-chave. E um dos princípios era o princípio da não discriminação a pessoas transgêneros e homens que têm sexo com outros homens.
Yeah. So this advancement was also elaborated with the health ministry. To discriminalize transgenders and men that have relationships with each other
A nível
as
do
a key
Ministério...
group, right?
Yeah.
As like a focus group.
E a nível do Ministério do Interior, que é a nossa polícia, nós tivemos uma revisão do Manual de Formação dos Agentes da Polícia e foram incluídas lá questões de orientação sexual e identidade de gênero.
So there was also a reform from the interior ministers, from the ministry that also forms like the police, that trains the police, to train the police in terms of these issues, in terms of like transgender issues and LGBT issues.
E como resultado disso é que hoje a Lambda tem mais de 800 polícias formados em matéria de direitos humanos, gênero e diversidade sexual.
So as a result, now Lambda has more than 800 policemen that are trained in issues of LGBT issues and diversity issues.
E recentemente, a nível da educação, do ensino, nós tivemos a aprovação de uma estratégia de implementação da política da juventude.
So in terms of education, now there was another advancement was the implementation of the youth policy and youth policy education.
E nesta política são abordadas questões de direitos humanos inclusivos e, igualmente, é abordado o princípio da não discriminação e igualdade de oportunidades para todos os jovens, independentemente da sua orientação sexual ou identidade de gênero.
So in this policy, there's also established to teach in schools human rights, and also that the youth should not be discriminated in terms of sexual orientation.
E em 2018, como um avanço também, é que o Ministério da Educação, na sua revisão do Sistema Nacional de Educação, eles incluíram lá a questão da educação equitativa e inclusiva.
So the National Education System also revealed its policy, and now it is established. Você pode repetir o nome? A educação.
Ministério da Educação.
Não, no final você falou educação.
Como é que eu ia dizer? Uma educação inclusiva e equitativa.
Equitativa.
Yeah.
Yes. So also establishing an equitable education.
E a ideia disso era ter um ensino de educação que fosse tolerante e que promovesse o respeito pelos direitos humanos.
Promote tolerant education systems and that promote human rights advocacy
Infeliz-
schools. That was in
Infelizmente,
2018.
infelizmente, em 2022, nós tivemos uma polêmica envolvendo o ensino no livro do ensino primário da 7ª classe, onde foi retirada alguma informação relativa à homossexualidade.
Unfortunately, in 2022, there was a problem that some primary schools books took out information about homosexuality from the books.
E o último avanço que eu vou aqui mencionar é, se calhar, falar da participação parlamentar e a sociedade civil, que vem acontecendo desde 2022.
So the last advancement that Edu wants to talk about is the relationship between the civil society and the parliament and the Congress.
E desde 2022 há um aumento na participação dos membros do parlamento em eventos da comunidade LGBT e, igualmente, há um crescimento significativo das atividades ou da coordenação entre as organizações LGBTs em Moçambique.
So they have been noticing that more participation from congressmen in Mozambique in civil society activities and LGBT activities since 2022.
E apesar desses avanços que consideramos sendo significativos para a promoção dos direitos LGBTs em Moçambique, nós tivemos também alguns retrocessos, vou passar aqui a mencionar.
However, even with those advancements at the LGBTQ scene in Mozambique, there was also some backwards, like that Edu wants to mention.
Então, apesar de existir alguma proteção legal, é evidente ainda a discriminação e a violência que pessoas LGBTs passam no dia a dia. E existem relatos de discriminação em hospitais, nas escolas e até por parte da polícia, que tem esse dever de zelo de prover essa segurança a todos.
So there are still occasions of discrimination in schools and hospitals and even by the police in Mozambique, some cases of it. So there's still some space to advance on that.
E temos um outro retrocesso que é o acesso à justiça. O acesso à justiça é um direito garantido constitucionalmente a todos os cidadãos, mas este direito continua sendo limitado para pessoas LGBTs. Nós temos aqui instituições, podes traduzir.
So another problem, another issue is access to justice. Like it's a constitutional right, but it's still a problem for LGBTQ people in Mozambique, the access to justice.
E existem instituições que provêm uma assistência jurídica gratuita, como o Instituto de Assistência e Patrocínio Jurídico e também a Ordem dos Advogados, mas são instituições que ainda não estão sensíveis às abordagens LGBTs.
So there are still some institutions, some organizations that provide legal assistance to LGBTQ people in Mozambique, but they're still not completely, how would you say, in touch with the problems.
E como resultado disso é que quando, por exemplo, os casos de violações de direitos humanos chegam ao judiciário, chegam aos tribunais, eles não são tratados como crimes que têm relação ou que são motivadas à discriminação em relação à identidade ou à orientação sexual. São tidos como crimes comuns ou violências que não são motivadas por outros fatores agravantes.
So as a result, when these cases go forward, they end up not being treated as kind of like crimes against LGBTQ Q people or diversity crimes. They ended up just treating these cases as other types of crimes.
E outro processo que temos enfrentado é a questão da dificuldade dos registros das organizações LGBTs em Moçambique. Esta questão tem sido muito burocrática e muitas vezes as organizações LGBTs têm o seu direito à associação negado com base na moral pública.
So another issue is the bureaucracy and the difficulty to register LGBTQ organizations in Mozambique. There's a lot of problems to like make them official organizations in terms of like moral policies that ended up not letting them become official institutions.
E exemplo prático disso é a questão da Lambda, que desde 2008 tem tido seu direito ao registro recusado, apesar das decisões judiciais favoráveis.
Even Lambda, since 2008, have been denied their plea to become like an institution, an official institution.
E os últimos retrocessos que aqui posso mencionar são a questão de termos ausência de leis antidiscriminatórias ou leis que especificamente vão defender a comunidade LGBT. Não existem leis específicas que abordem sobre as violações cometidas com base na orientação sexual ou identidade de gênero da vítima.
Another issue is that they don't have like a specific laws, like a specific legislation that would protect against violations and against sexual orientation or gender identity. So there are not specific laws in Mozambique protecting against those violations.
E a nível da lei do trabalho, desde 2007, nós tínhamos na letra da lei a questão da orientação sexual mencionada como fator de proibição da discriminação. E no ano passado nós tivemos uma revisão da lei do trabalho e essa questão da orientação sexual foi retirada da letra da lei, que não tem implicações jurídicas, mas que pelo contexto social em que Moçambique vive, acreditamos que ainda é importante termos essas questões mencionadas na letra da lei. Então, por 16 anos tivemos esta questão na lei do trabalho mencionada diretamente e hoje não temos.
Even workers legislation, labor legislation in Mozambique used to consider it this kind of like LGBTQ issues, but now there isn't none. And Edu is mentioning that it's important, especially given the socio-economic context in Mozambique, to address in the workers' legislation also issues of diversity and sexual orientation and LGBT issues, but there are none in the workers' legislation there.
E se calhar agora vou mencionar aqui algumas recomendações que eu acho importantes e que também vão de acordo com a própria resolução 275. E a primeira delas é desenvolver instrumentos, desenvolver métodos de coleta de dados sobre as discriminações ou as violações que pessoas LGBTs sofrem.
So now Edu wants to mention some recommendations based on the reveal, the 275 reveal. And one of the recommendations is to actually start collecting data about the violations and the discriminations that the population goes through. So one of the recommendations is to start collecting data on those cases.
Porque apesar de termos em estudos que mencionam Moçambique como sendo um país tolerante às questões LGBTs, nós ainda temos muitas situações de discriminação e violações e que não são devidamente evidenciados, não são devidamente reportados, e com a ausência destes dados, a impressão que passa é que estas situações de violações não acontecem em Moçambique, e elas acontecem.
Yes, because even though Mozambique is said that Mozambique is a tolerant country, if you don't have the data on those violations, it seems like these things are not happening in the country, but it's not true. They are happening. So it's very important to have data on the violations. So we have an overview of what it's actually happening. And those violations, Edu is mentioning, they are being like underreported. So we have to track them.
E outra recomendação ou sugestão seria adotarmos, ou seja, o Estado moçambicano adotar e promulgar leis que especificamente incluam a orientação sexual e a identidade de gênero, e abordando de forma eficaz sobre a homofobia, a transfobia, a bifobia, né?
Yeah. So another recommendation is that the Mozambique state, the Mozambique law, has to address specifically issues of sexual orientation and gender identity. So they are written into law to prevent crimes such as homophobia, transphobia, and hate
E
crimes.
também há uma necessidade de se simplificar o processo de registro de organizações LGBTs e rever artigos, disposições restritivas na lei da associação.
And another recommendation is to simplify the process of registering LGBTQ organizations in Mozambique. They are now very bureaucratic and very complicated.
E de um modo geral, para que tenhamos devidamente a resolução 275 efetivada, nós teríamos de domesticar esta resolução nas nossas leis internas, porque não basta só aceitar ou assinar, ser signatária desta resolução, se nas nossas próprias leis internas nós não temos estes valores refletidos.
And another recommendation is that the resolution 275 should be put into law, should be legal, and not just a resolution. So it's actually turned into a right in Mozambique. So a lot of those issues that the resolution mentions should be put into legislation, should be turned into legislation, and have a legal status in Mozambique.
Então, de um modo geral, há necessidade de que nossas leis internas sejam interpretadas e aplicadas em harmonia com a Carta Africana dos Direitos Humanos, com a Declaração Universal e com instrumentos de direitos humanos como a própria Resolução 275.
Sorry, Zhao, before you translate, I was just going to ask if you can please maybe ask if we can wrap up the points.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Eles estão só pedindo para caminhar para o final, Edu.
Bom, esta era a última intervenção.
Sim. Você pode só repetir, que aí eu traduzo essa parte final.
Era mesmo uma questão de termos nas nossas leis internas. Eu dizia que é importante que as nossas leis internas sejam interpretadas e aplicadas em harmonia com a Carta Africana dos Direitos Humanos, com a Declaração Universal e com instrumentos que protegem a comunidade LGBT, como a Resolução 275.
So lastly, Edu wants to mention that this legislation and the resolution should be talked to the universal human rights and African human rights. So this measure, so this revision is also synchronized with this universal human rights discourse. Yeah, I guess that was it.
Então, obrigado,
But
João. Eu paro por aqui.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your inputs. Thank you so much, Edu, for highlighting the perspectives in Mozambique and also highlighting the progressions as well as the regressions that are happening at the moment. Thank you so much for that. We're now going to be moving on to our next speaker. I just want to check if the Deputy Minister is able to come in now. Okay. Okay, they're not ready yet. We'll just move on to the next speaker. We're going to be bringing on Latishka from Pan-African Elder.
I think Steve.
Is there? Okay, sorry. Is Steve ready to come in? Sorry about that.
Sorry, I could not unmute myself. Sorry.
No worries. Okay. Thank you. You may take over.
Thank you so much, and apologies that I had to join and rejoin again. But I actually just stepped out for a few minutes, but I listened carefully to the messages. Let me take the opportunity, Busi, to really appreciate all the panelists for the great input, concerns, issues that have been tabled. At the core of this is really the issues, that we must look at from the human rights lens of all persons, inclusive of persons in the LGBTI community. And in all of this, that our lives are characterized by the intersectional lens, of which everything that we do in a development space is a commitment to protecting people on the basis of the categories that ranges from race, nationality, sex, gender, ethics, religion, and many other aspects. But our country, in our constitution, Section 9 makes it clear that, we protect everyone, regardless of age, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, disability, social status, sexual orientation, gender identity, nationality. And this is amongst many other grounds where the idea of access and the idea of the benefits of development is embedded to our work, ensuring equality and dignity for all. The lives of sexual and gender minority are marred by these intersecting discriminatory practices that exist in society, but also it exists as well in the adverse of policy framework and other areas. And this affects the well-being and the ability to participate fully and effectively in economic activity and opportunities. And this is where, when you look at issues affecting persons, particularly asylum seekers, refugees, and many foreign nations, is the restrictions that they find themselves in, which Thomas spoke a lot on, and that negatively impacts their lives. in particular of LGBTI people. And with this negative impact, it limits to their full participation around socioeconomic development in society. And somehow it eliminates the existence of persons. And while you'd move away from your own country of origin to finding a refuge elsewhere, or exploring even just your own growth path, and being met with stigma and discrimination and exclusion. And that on its own results in poor economic and human development outcome. So many lives of LGBTI persons who are migrant, who are asylum seekers, who are refugees, are then characterized to challenges of restriction, and it exposes the sexual and gender minorities to victimization, as well as exposing them to violence, to hate crimes, to violation in many ways that we shouldn't be accepting and tolerating in society. And this is as a result also of the status in many which the countries they come from, of instance, they experience criminalization, and that is exacerbating. And I think if you look at the current reality in many of our African states where criminalization is exacerbating, there's reintroduction of these harmful laws, in the plight of many of these countries, Ghana, Uganda, and many for that matter. And this widespread discrimination and persecution persist, particularly in parts of Africa, but also in parts of the world where same-sex activities are perceived and are seen and are expressed as illegal and therefore criminalized. So I think we really need to look at the injustices, but also more so look at what we do in what is ingrained in legal frameworks that potentially excludes persons, particularly in the LGBTI community. And for that, I think Thomas laid a reality of the current status and experiences of LGBTI persons in South Africa, particularly who are refugees and asylum seekers. No identity document eliminates you to the really fully participate, but more so, it makes it even hard for the country to plan and to include and count you without any kind of documentation. And these are some of the challenges that exist, but they've been persisting for far too long, for that matter. And when those injustices become ingrained, the potential of LGBTI persons to actively participate in development process becomes constrained, which negatively impacts on their lives, their livelihood, but also generally in society and economic growth for that matter. So these challenges even affect safety and respect for the human rights and dignity of persons, because they are really grounded by that stigma, exclusion, discrimination, and often experiencing violence. It's a big problem. And I think when I listened, Monica was also alluding to what constitutes some of the priorities, including the development of the Resolution 275. That is an African Commission on Human and People's Rights that exists. Here in South Africa, we have setbacks, but we've also seen quite a lot of improvement. And I think, Thomas, by virtue of being here and by virtue of trying to create a safe space, particularly the work that is done by the Fruit Basket, already tells you that even if we have limitation and challenges, you can exist in the space. And I want us to affirm that and not scrap out totality the work that South African government and civil society and human rights defenders in South Africa has done. And I do not want us to erase that most important part. And many organizations in South Africa, whether you talk about Out, Triangle Project, PASOP, Access Chapter 2, and many have done incredible work working with government to change the trajectory that exists, have worked with the refugee reception centers. So I think we have to mark some of those progresses. And despite the progressive legislation framework, in South Africa, but decriminalizing SOGI, this is clearly evident of South Africa's important legal and freedom charter framework that we work with. But I think this only is not affecting just persons, who are migrant and who are also LGBTI. It also affects South Africans because we've got high-level incidents of gender-based violence in South Africa and affects LGBTI persons. Hate crimes affects LGBTI persons. We've seen Black lesbian women who have been subjected to horrific gender-based violence because of their sexual orientation. We've seen corrective rape, over the last few decades as a form of correcting, the aberration from heterosexual normative framework, gay men who have been subjected to terrible forms of gay bashing, transgender individuals. So we constantly see the anti-gender, not only just from legal frameworks, but also from societal pushback, that affects entirely every LGBTI persons. And the situation experienced must also consider some of the dynamics, geographical location, and many other things that participate. Class is a big issue. Race is a big issue, or racism rather than race is a big issue. And the kind of violence manifestation also that exists in the education sector, where persons in the LGBTI community are harassed, humiliated, bullied, and are victims of horrendous crime and sexual abuse. LGBTI persons also experiencing challenges when accessing or seeking employment. I can also tell you about my first job interview, how I was discriminated and I was misgendered and so forth. So ordinarily that broadly LGBTI persons are struggling. And when you actually even look further into the experiences of LGBTI migrants, asylum seekers, and so forth, you can see how more intersectional lens pushes more into the back of the list. We see it in the forms of recruitment, interviews, workplace policies that are challenged. And while many companies and different institutions are trying to improve that, but whether even LGBTI persons have got opportunities to occupy senior positions, decision-making positions, but that they are also equally paid accordingly. So those are some of the issues, that we deal with completely, really. But what are some of the measures that needs to advance inclusion and safety of LGBTI persons? And we must begin with adoption of laws, like what we did in South Africa, but then take it further in developing programs to align those laws and then promote inclusion and protection of those laws against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and sexual identity or gender identity. Laws that perpetuate forms of discrimination practice should be repealed everywhere, amended, and all these laws must prohibit such discrimination. There must be measures to decriminalize. You've raised the issue, Thomas, of where you have sex workers within the community, and it's one thing to decriminalize a person on the basis of their sexual orientation and gender identity. But it's another thing to be arrested, even now for sex work. So some of these are quite so much that we need to deal with. So there are quite a lot of issues, Busi, and I really want to say that we must move and look at how we deal with the issue of documentation, so that we can protect persons, not only just by the identity document, but it's also around the gender, legal gender recognition as well that is needed, particularly for transgender persons, but also for intersex individuals for that matter. There must be autonomy, there must be self-identification, but there must be an extension to specific needs around medical interventions, and because many who are transitioning and many who are intersex are experiencing lengthy administrative and judicial processes. So there must be also measures around training and putting in place SOGI inclusive training for public service, but also for other institutions. So we must look at awareness training, but also looking at our own government officials, police, health workers, medical staff, education, judiciary, and many other role players that may intersect with issues of LGBTI persons. So some of the things must be mandatory in change. And those are things that when you look at our national intervention strategy, which is led by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, it really speaks to all these issues that our government is really committed. Our current president, His Excellency President Ramaphosa, is a very committed person. He's a feminist himself, and he consistently has been speaking to the issues, and many other departments that we are focusing on to make sure that there is proper integration. I did see that, when I joined, there was an individual official who was coming from Department of Home Affairs. They are here. We've been dealing with a lot of cases, even in my previous role. As the Executive Director of Access Chapter 2, we've been really working, with the Department of Home Affairs to try and block the backlog, but also deal with some of the issues. So I really want to say, Busi, Program Director, that thank you for this space. I hope this conversation doesn't end here, but we can speak much more on solutions that must be in place to address challenges and issues that affects LGBTI persons. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that input. It was a very holistic input. You touched on the lived realities of LGBTI people within society, within the employment space. You spoke about the asylum seekers and documentation. And I think the most important one is about the training of SOGI awareness, public awareness campaign. I think that's a very important aspect that we still need to work on. I think, thank you so much for that. We're now going to be bringing on Lakshita from Pan-African ILGA. They are an advocacy and campaigns officer. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Busi, for this space. Greetings, everybody from all the part of the world that you're joining this conversation. It's always a pleasure and interesting to hear all the pioneers who've been part of the journey of making Resolution 275 successful, and congratulations to you all on the 10 years anniversary of this very important document in the protection and promotion of LGBT rights across the continent. And it's I think the previous panelists have already highlighted most part of the conversation that we are trying to seek to address and find solution to. So I think the topic of advancing and protecting the right of the community across Africa and the region, the southern part as well, is critically important, particularly the right to safety. I think a fundamental issue for both local LGBT person and refugees seeking protection from violence and persecution. I think the first panelist really highlighted the situation in South Africa and how it is important to have this conversation today. So as we look back, I think Monica also mentioned over the past decade, we have seen some significant progress we need to acknowledge in some African countries in the region regarding the recognition of LGBT rights. Of course, South Africa remains a beacon in this regard, being the first country to constitutionally outlaw discrimination on SOGI, on sexual orientation. And then we have other countries such as Angola, Mozambique, Botswana, Mauritius, Namibia in the region that have also taken bold steps in decriminalizing same-sex relationship, signaling progress towards inclusivity. And most, I think all also have been done through strategic litigation. And to go a little bit deeper, I think we have also been very deliberate in the approach that we have taken to come to this stage in those countries. If we look at, for example, Mauritius, we have asked for constitutional redress, but also we have tackled the issue of religion influence that we have that normally, that usually affect the community because we are a multi-ethnic and religious institution play a very important role in our society there. And we had a lot of religious influence trying to oppress the community. So I think when the strategic litigation was taken, the lawyers were very deliberate as well to mention the religious sensitivity, multi-ethnicity of the country so that the court can also pronounce. And then we finally got a favorable judgment that the court has reaffirmed the position of Mauritius as a secular state, demarcating the state-religion relationship when it comes to sexual and gender minority rights in the country. So it's very clear that religious institutions' belief cannot come and influence policies when it comes to the protection of the community, because we have reaffirmed the position of our state as a secular one. So I think this is something important as well that other countries can try to learn from because of the anti-rights movement we are seeing across the continent, namely in the name of African values, morality, religious belief. So it's important for us to also how to see that how we can strategize and learn from each other. And of course, the South African court, constitutional court as well, has really helped in this perspective on religion. I think this is something that is coming in the discussion of LGBT rights across the continent, and we need to see how we're going to strategize and work towards it. But however, despite this advancement, setbacks continue to haunt the African community, unfortunately, the queer community. We see the example of Zambia, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Malawi recently. They continue actually demonstrate how entrenched homophobia and state-sanctioned violence remain, driving the community underground and perpetuating a cycle of violence, harassment, and abuse. And this is where the question of refugee and asylum seekers comes in, that even in some nations with progressive legal frameworks, such as South Africa highlighted, the community continue to face discrimination, hate crimes, and inadequate access to justice. So I think, as has been discussed as well, the post-recent crime says it all. And these inconsistencies between legal protection and lived realities reveal the need for more than just legislative change, that we also need to see how to transform societal attitudes and ensure the full implementation of existing laws. I think this also highlights the importance on the convening that happened a few weeks ago on Resolution 275, where state representatives were present in those conversations on how they can utilize Resolution 275 in the protection of the community against violence. So I think these are the kind of conversation that we need to have. How do we change societal attitude, and how do we make state actually counter the challenges that happens, for example, with the trans community when it comes to legal gender recognition, which has been demonstrated, at least in Mauritius, that this is merely an administrative issue, and then how can states take it up from there? So now, as we turn our attention to the situation of LGBT refugees that have already been discussed a little bit earlier, the realities are even more distressing, unfortunately. If we look at the regional level across the continent, I think the case of the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya is also a vivid example. Aside the one in our region, Southern Port, I think the community there, they are continuing to face extreme violence, harassment, and threats to their safety, not only from fellow refugees actually, but also from camp authorities who have often been indifferent or complicit in all of these. So the community in Kakuma, they are forced to live in unsafe environment with little to no protection, regardless of their SOGIs. So I think this is a broader regional crisis of ensuring safety for all the refugees. And again, I will take the example of Mauritius because sometimes it appears that maybe if we've decriminalized or we have right to register, right to association, freedom of expression. But Mauritius is another example that have seen LGBT asylum seekers seeking refuge in Europe and Canada due to the hostile environment they face at home. So sometimes we might be having inclusive laws that protects the community, but the situation in the family settings, the situation in the community, in the society itself is not inclusive and protective at all. So based on conservative, orthodox religious belief, the community feel oppressed in those spaces. So they prefer to leave because already identifying as part of the community, we already face challenges such as unemployment, economic challenges, various rights are implicated because it's all intersectional. Now you come home and you're already oppressed at home, so you just want to look for a space to breathe. And many community in Mauritius, many people in the community in Mauritius has sought asylum seeking in, for example, countries like France and Canada, which offer more robust protection for the community. However, these processes are very long because there's a lot of paper, administrative checks, investigation that goes on, and many asylum seekers remain in a legal limbo, facing uncertainty and continuous threats while they await the decision of their asylum claims. It can take a few years, and in the meantime, you just need to see how you're gonna navigate around in those complex environments. So then we at Pan-Africa ILGA, we have recognized the urgent need to address the unique challenges faced up by the community in refugee camp and asylum seeking. We are prioritizing, we are working on that area, collaborating with our member organization and international partners to ensure that the LGBT community in refugee and refugee camp, they able to receive the protection and dignity they deserve. So this is a work in progress that at PI we are taking it very seriously, and we are actually looking at how we can help on this area. So our efforts are not focused on advocacy, but also on how to provide resources, support, and how to provide safe spaces, but of course to collaborate with our member organization. So as my previous co-panelist has already highlighted, it is essential that more African nations not only adopt laws like the countries that have been progressive, such as South Africa, but also commit to domesticate international agreements and regional one like the Resolution 275 of the African Commission. We also have Resolution 552 now, because these laws also can actually address the vulnerability of the community in refugee setting. I think also the convening come at a very important and timely discussion, because we need to ensure how to hold government accountable and how they need to take proactive step. And I'm happy that we have Steve here in the meeting, that she's able to identify and see what can be taken back to the government of South Africa, for example. But of course, when you meet other state officials in their spaces, when it comes to gender equality, inclusion, how do we learn from each other? How do we make them understand the lived realities of the community? And how do we hold perpetrators of violence accountable to handle cases involved in violence and discrimination against the community, but also in the refugee setting with sensitivity and also urgency. So I think the international community also, they play an important role. And this comes to mainly there's a lot of eyes on Africa right now with the rise of anti-rights movement. And then we have states who are coming to criminalize, and even states that never criminalized, now they are coming to bring bills to oppress. And I mean, when there are other way more pressing issues, we all know that they try to scapegoat the community as well. So how do we draw attention? And then we highlight those things, and how we strengthen our cross-border collaboration between African countries. For this, we can say SADC, Southern Port, and then in different regions. Because if we look at the broader continental level, we can say that the Southern Port is doing quite better compared to Eastern Port or Western Port. So how do we continue to strengthen our cross-border collaboration and the international partners to provide safe routes and shelters for the community in refugee setting, and how support networks and safe houses must be expanded, as highlighted by the first panelist, limited capacity to provide support and shelters to the community, and how do we provide interim protection as asylum claims are processed. And I think all this comes to the capacity building and sensitization campaign, as highlighted also for law enforcement, healthcare personnel, the judiciary, and how, for example, the healthcare system should be inclusive to welcome the community in clinics, in hospital, and that they're already facing challenges in public, and how do we provide an inclusive treatment and don't discriminate based on SOGIES. So I think this is something that is a work in progress, and some states are trying to do better, but some states are just going with the flow from the anti-rights movement. But we also know the issue of funding that is coming to the continent to bring those laws, like we can see in Uganda, in Ghana, in Burkina Faso, Liberia. We can feel the presence of the anti-rights movement with all the funding. And I think they have not really gained the terrain in the southern part like they are doing in the east and western part. But I think maybe also because of our dynamics ourselves in the southern African region. And so we need to see, when we're speaking about South Africa and the region right now for this conversation, how do we learn from each other? How do we help when Zambia is coming to say that they are Christian nations? So does it mean that we are allowed to oppress the community in the name of religion? When Namibia is coming with those narrative as well, when the judiciary has upheld some positive court judgment towards the protection of the community. Meanwhile, the parliament is trying to be, some MPs are trying to bring bill in the parliament. How do we balance? How do we navigate around when Malawi is coming to uphold the constitutionality of continuing to criminalize against the community? Sorry, how do we help others? How do we help judicial officers, etc., to not get influenced by religious institutions or avoid state interference. And I think I need to congratulate those who organized the convening to bring commissioners, to bring state representative and NHRIs in their space to understand the importance of Resolution 275. And then how do we take it from there to continue addressing the challenges that the community is facing? So I will end here for now, and I will leave it to Busi for the next. But thank you very much. I really appreciate the other panelists' inputs, and I think this is a very constructive and fruitful conversation that should not be stopped here, of course, but what do we take from here? Where do we go from those conversation? So thank you very much, and over to you, Busi.
Thank you so much, Aksha, for your input. It's been very fruitful to hear from the different perspectives of the different countries within the Southern Africa, North, West, and Central. I think the two most important things that you spoke about was that the legal protections are very different to the lived realities, and we need to be transforming the social attitudes, which is something that we all keep missing. And the cross-border collaborations, I think, must be strengthened. That is really important. Thank you so much for your input. We're now going to be moving to Petrus Hatupopi, who is stationed at the Gambia. Petrus, over to you.
Thank you very much, Busi. Good morning, everyone. I see that time is going, so I'll try to be brief, as most points have already been touched on by the previous speakers. So I'll take a similar approach to Monica's presentation with regard to the regional and international measures that have been adopted for advancing and protecting the rights of LGBTQIA persons through regional and international human rights legal instruments. And I will just focus on the African system of human rights protection. So I'll focus on the measures that have been adopted through the African Commission to promote and protect the rights of LGBTQI+ persons. So I'll first provide an update on the measures adopted by the African Commission to date. And that is mainly through resolutions. Most of us here were in Sandton, Johannesburg, where we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the adoption of Resolution 275. And I think Monica and Lekshita have already alluded to the content of Resolution 275 and its relevance insofar as the protection of sexual and gender minorities is concerned. So in addition to Resolution 275, the Commission has also adopted Resolution 552, which affirmed the rights of intersex people on the continent, calling for countries to prohibit a wide range of human rights violations against intersex people, including violence, forced surgeries, and discrimination. And the Commission went further on again to adopt Resolution 376 on the situation of human rights defenders in Africa, where it also called for the protection of NGOs, civil society organizations working in the area of protection of persons that are of sexual or gender minority. So these resolutions are very crucial, very important, and very groundbreaking, but we really need to find ways on how to assist and complement the African Commission, especially in aspects related to the implementation of these resolutions. And of course, the previous speakers have already alluded to the good developments that have been observed within the continent in the past few years, and some of these positive developments can be attributed to Resolution 275. But despite those notable strides and achievements, we have heard about the retrogressive developments and very concerning developments, and there's still a wide range of violence cases being reported in different parts of the continent or within the region. And these retrogressive, discriminatory, and oppressive developments in terms of legislation, policy, and practices in some countries in the continent need to be properly documented, identified, and also we need to strategize on how to counter and challenge these developments, either legally or through other measures, as they really create a fertile ground for widespread violence against persons, on the basis of their sexual or gender identity. So for us to succeed really in ensuring that the LGBTQI+ community is safe from any form of violence, we first need to ensure that we get really rid of all these forms of discriminatory and oppressive laws, as they really create a fertile ground and they create a conducive environment for impunity in cases of violence against members of the LGBTQI+ community. So there is a need to really disseminate the resolutions that I've just mentioned. Most of them are not well known, so there is a need to introduce these resolutions to different arms of governments within the region, the judiciary, the executive, the legislature, for them to be aware of these resolutions and the obligations that they impose upon the government to protect. And importantly, just to highlight that Resolution 275 calls upon the government to protect all the NGOs that are working in the area of protection of sexual and gender minorities, to ensure that they are free from any form of violence and attacks, and also to ensure that the police fulfill its duty to investigate any kind of alleged violation of persons based on their real or imputed sexual identity or orientation. And also the prosecutions need to be aware of these resolutions, to be aware of their duty to exercise due diligence in terms of prosecution, to ensure that the perpetrators of these heinous crimes against members of the LGBTQ communities are held accountable, and to ensure that those crimes are not committed with impunity. And it's the only way we can really ensure the effectiveness or effective implementation of Resolution 275. Trying to skip some of the points that have already been alluded to. And also, maybe the NGOs that are involved in litigation, it's very important to really cite these resolutions. When you bring cases before national courts or before regional human rights bodies or international human rights bodies, it's important to recite these resolutions to ensure that they really evolve into well-established principles and jurisprudence, either at national or international level. As you may be aware, most of these resolutions are soft law in that they are not really hard law. So if you want them to evolve into well-established precedents and jurisprudence, it's very important to cite these resolutions in cases of alleged violations of persons based on their real or imputed sexual orientation or gender identity as well. And also, just to highlight the need to train police officers. Police officers need to be trained of their duty to protect and investigate. And also judges need to be also trained and made be aware of these legal instruments for them to be really be awake and be aware of the plight of LGBTQI persons insofar as violence and safety and all other human rights violations are concerned. It's only when they are aware that there can be more tailored responses to these forms of violations. And also to just reiterate the need for identification of these retrogressive and oppressive laws, because there are some countries that have these retrogressive and oppressive laws within the continent, but these laws were never challenged. So there's a need to challenge these forms of laws from the national level and going all the way to the international level. And it's very important to challenge these laws within the national courts first, because most cases, for them to be admissible at the international level, for example, through the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, there need to be an exhaustion of local remedies. So it's important to first go to the local courts and try to see if you can get any form of success from the local courts. And if there's no success that can be obtained or favorable judgment from the local courts, then one can then approach international or regional human rights bodies, such as the African Court on Human and People's Rights and the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And I think so far there's been not a single case that challenge these forms of oppressive or retrogressive laws. So they said it's very important to also take that route in challenging these forms of discriminatory laws as well. And also, just maybe a recent good example. We have all heard about the recent judgment from Namibia in the case of Dawson versus Minister of Justice, where the common law offenses of sodomy and unnatural sexual offenses were found unconstitutional in the High Court of Namibia. And it's a very interesting judgment that I think is available online, and I would just like to encourage everyone to read it for those that have not read it, and I assume everyone has read it. So there's in light of these judgments, what I've realized is that there's a need to really advocate for the protection of judges as well, because in most cases, judgments are obtained in favor, or the orders obtained as thought, but afterwards, no one really protects the judiciary and the judges from the backlash that comes after that, the insults, the criticism that comes towards judges, towards the judiciary as an institution. And this is very dangerous and very, it's very dangerous to the independence of the judiciary in the execution of its duties. So if you want to really ensure that the courts are independent to exercise their adjudication mandates in this kind of cases, it's important to ensure that you also advocate for the independence of the judiciary and really protect judges from any form of backlash, because failure to do so will create an environment of fear among judges, and will even resort to what journalists call self-censorship, and they may not be really willing to take on or to preside over this form of cases. So there is also a need to advocate for the protection and speak for and support these judges and support lawmakers that take a stand against injustice and speak for the protection and speak against the violence of members of LGBTQIA persons, as the rights of LGBTQIA persons are human rights. And also we need to maybe push for or advocate for laws that provide for aggravation of sentences in criminal cases, where if someone has been found guilty of violating someone's rights or of perpetrating violence against someone based on their actual or imputed sexual orientation or gender identity, to make this an aggravating factor to ensure that an appropriately harsh sentence is imposed as well. So these are the proposals that I have with regard to measures to ensure safety and protection of LGBTQI persons in terms of law and law reform. And I'm just trying to see what to leave out and what to include. And so there is also a need to really, I think this has been alluded to by Lecturer with regard to the societal attitude and the role of religious leaders. It's very important to also identify traditional leaders, religious leaders, and political figures that can really take a stand and speak for justice and speak for the protection and promotion of the rights of LGBTQI persons. And by doing so, it's the only way we can really change the attitude of the society and change the tone. And we need those influential voices and those influential figures to change the perception and to create a conducive environment for the protection and promotion of the rights of LGBTQI persons. So in short, those are my proposals as to the rights measures or the measures I think are appropriate in the protection and promotion of the rights of LGBTQI persons. Thank you very much, Pussy. That's my contribution. And,
thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, Petrus. We really appreciate that. And thank you for reminding us that we must continue to cite these resolutions when we're bringing cases forward, and that there's a need to always challenge these regressive laws and protection of the lawmakers. I think that's also an important aspect. Thank you so much for that. We're now going to be moving on to the question and answer section of our dialogue. What you can do is you can use the button that says react with the heart to put up your hand if you want to ask a question or an input. You're also more than welcome to put an input on the chat. You also can just quickly introduce yourself and then ask your question directly to a panelist or say your contribution. So I'm going to be looking at the screen of people who would like to ask questions. The floor is now open. I think there's one question that was in the chat that asks that, I'm going to read it out loud. It's from Bugelwa, who's asking, can the panelists please comment on the role of faith-based organizations, especially the Christian community in the LGBTI community? So that's the first question that we have, and any of the panelists could answer that. The second is that they would also be interesting from Rob Moore. It says, it would be interesting to hear also from the discussion about the practical accommodations made in institutions, such as schools, government, businesses, etc., in accommodating gender segregated refugee centers, bathroom and change room facilities, and the heated occasion of the issues in schools everywhere. So I think from those two questions, and I'll take Sephora's question and then back to the panelists to give a bite. So Sephora, over to you. Sephora, you may unmute. We'll just give
Sorry, I was struggling to unmute there. I have, I think on the first question that you read out from the chat group, I would want to add all religious communities. You know, that homophobia, discrimination against LGBTQIA+ community is also very strong in a Muslim community. So I think when we talk about the how do we balance the sort of religious, tribal, cultural issues with a community awareness on the rights of LGBTQIA+ persons is important. So that's the one point I want to make. The second point is I get the sense from the range of speakers and from having worked with the sector previously that there is a number of organizations. Some of them overlap in terms of what they do. This, I'm talking about civil society organizations. Some have specific focus areas, but I'm beginning to get the sense that there might be a need, particularly on the legislative side, implementation of legislation and the monitoring and evaluation thereof may require a broader kind of social movement across the region or across the continent. A kind of social movement, network or coalition that will address issues, that is able to take best practice, legal examples from some African countries to other African countries, and informing that kind of broader social movement or coalition network, what, you know, I mean, there's slight differences between it, but talking about a strong, single, united voice on particular issues. My question, and I think it's not to any specific speaker, it's actually open to the meeting. And it's something, Busi, I have engaged with you on a kind of personal communication level, and that is whether there needs to be a serious paradigm shift in how LGBTQIA+ community issues are addressed, but also recognized. So the one thing which I think speakers have covered is that LGBTQIA+ rights are human rights. And those are inalienable rights. So it's accorded to you regardless of any other marginalized sector, okay? So that's the one issue. The other issue is the LGBTQIA+ community which is the one I've discussed informally previously, is linked to the feminist movement and agenda. And it's something I've often wondered about, how whether there needs to be a kind of strategic paradigm shift. Is that the correct location of the sector? And yes, we do have male feminists as well, but I think that most feminist organizations tend to focus more on women. Where does that leave male members of the LGBTQIA plus sector? Then specifically to Deputy Minister Steve Letsika, I'm not sure if she is with us. I would like to hear how and what the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, which is where the LGBTQIA sector is now placed. What exactly is that department doing around ensuring that from a human rights perspective, which includes equal access to socioeconomic development rights, what is the department doing to make sure that these issues are covered? And for me, these issues need to be covered in all legislation. So I think all the speakers have spoken about a legal framework that looks at the rights, that looks at issues of violence, that addresses the challenges. But at the end of the day, what we want is that LGBTQIA plus persons are recognized and treated as any other human in a society that doesn't have to have a label attached to their existence as a human, and that there is a very critical need for us to scrutinize every piece of legislation that is passed by government that cuts across the social and economic spectrum, and that we introduce the rights of LGBTQI persons into every single piece of legislation that has to do with freedom, democracy, human rights, and equal socioeconomic development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Safura. We're just going to quickly give Monica a chance to respond. Monica, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Busi, and thank you everyone for the questions. I want to start by apologizing because I have to leave shortly. But I think I agree with the recommendations so far made. And I think the caveat I need to put is that I think there is context. And context, by context, I mean there isn't a one size fits all solution. We have a lot of common practices. We have a lot of common lives, if you like, and some of these laws are even similar. But it's how we experience those things or those practices on those, whether it's a custom, whether it's a law, it's that is important, and then that's the way to design or to develop a solution, and I think that is important. The change of laws itself does not necessarily change, the hearts and minds of people. We've seen South Africa as a big example of that. Someone talked about implementation. That's important. And while we can enforce laws and force the police to do, to do the needful, what they have to do. Our lives are not always at at those places where you can enforce law. There's a lot that nobody hears about within the families. And I think those are the narratives that we want to change. And the little things that we do, and this is why I was saying we need to celebrate and acknowledge all the small things, because I think it shows a shift in thinking, a shift in tolerance, a shift in actually believing that once you see the people behind the letters, and you see the suffering, you see just the struggle to access certain services or certain rights, and just be themselves. And I think that kind of changes how you perceive them. Of course, there are people that will never be able to change, and we know that. And in that way, we need to actually concentrate and work with those that are willing to change, which brings me to the religious communities or leaders. Just like in any government, I think they are allies within the religious fraternity, whether it's Islamic, Christian, Jewish, whatever. And we need to use those champions. We need to find them. We need to use those champions, those churches, those religious leaders, where we can find those champions, because they are the ones who are able to know, to communicate with others within their fraternity, to at least to move the needle towards a little bit more tolerance. And religion and culture are a very big part of life. We don't just, become LGBTI persons. We are LGBTI person. That's one part of who we are, and culture. And so I think that's where we need to kind of bring in the context and understand that all these laws apply within this very big medley of factors that need to be taken into consideration. I think some of the other questions were directed at Steve and others, but I want to thank SALO and Busi and everyone for inviting me, and good luck, and we'll meet in the different spaces. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. I appreciate that. I'm just going to read out these comments and then give back to the panelists to answer. So another comment asks is that one of the biggest challenge of that LGBTI persons is attitudinal barriers faced in our communities and workspaces, service providers. Until service providers can have a mind shift and serve from a humanitarian perspective, our struggles continue. In the South African Constitution, it's clear on paper, but we need to start holding people accountable. Another comment says that very interesting points made about the need for protection of pro-LGBTI figures and organizations, such as the judiciary, the NGOs, and the backlash from activity is hostile, especially in international right-wing Christianity. The question also then from Lukhulumango says, would it not be strategic to advocate for the gender-neutral toilets in totality instead of the addition of current status quo? Is the rise of advocacy in the third toilet an option for gender neutral, not directly perpetuating hate or discrimination towards the queer community, especially those who are trans? Should we not be advocating for a total change in the status quo of bathrooms that are gender neutral? So any of the panelists can come in and respond to the questions that have been posed in the chat, or you can also respond to each other in the inputs. So in no particular order, we'll give it to Steve. Are you here to answer some of the questions? Okay, I don't see them here on my screen. All right, I'll give it then to Lakshita to answer some of the questions or comments, response. And then you can also use this, sorry, as a way of wrapping up and closing remarks as well.
All right. No, thank you very much, Lucy. And thank you. Okay. Thank you for the inputs and the question. I think that those are very important points that we need to highlight when we are having this conversation. And we all know that when it comes to religious and culture, it's very sensitive, and it's like you're touching someone very dearest thing that they hold, and they get very sensitive when it comes to this. And then it becomes more critical when you associate it with the community, because we need to acknowledge the complexity and duality of their influence of religion as a whole. But if we look at the question that was asked, on one hand, many Christian institutions have historically perpetrated harmful narratives and exclusionary practices, often framing the community as morally incompatible with their religious belief. And this has contributed to stigma, discrimination, and even violence against the community across the continent, fueling anti-rights rhetoric and policies in some countries. And now we are seeing the rise of evangelicals and all the thing coming to frame it in the name of Christianity and religion again. Uganda is an example, Ghana is an example, and so on. So, however, we also need to acknowledge that there's a growing movement within certain faith-based groups towards inclusion and advocacy for LGBTQIA rights. We take the example of South Africa. When it comes to the Muslim community, we have the Imam, who's the first one who's openly gay and even is providing his space to provide teaching on Islam and queer education. I think this is very important as well to highlight amidst the challenges that we are facing in the name of religion. So progressive Christian voices, including those with ecumenical networks, have been working to challenge traditional interpretations of scripture that justify exclusion, offering more compassionate, affirming perspective. This group are playing crucial role in bridging gap between faith and sexual diversity, promoting dialogue and fostering communities where the community can find spiritual belonging. Because not to forget that when we speak about religion, there's also the issue of religious conversion practices that happens across the continent, and for example in Kenya, Uganda. And the very interesting point, in Uganda, for example, I don't know how much of you are aware, but when there was the constitutional petition of the latest AHA 2023, there was even a pastor who came to challenge and join this constitutional petition, saying that AHA violates his right to privacy and confidentiality because he cannot mention or disclose who's coming to his place for spiritual guidance or healing. So this is a violation of the right to privacy, and he joined the petition and he was there. So you can see we need to acknowledge those progress, and we need to see how we can learn from those religious leaders who are also trying to make the difference. But then, of course, when we speak about toilets, education, it comes to comprehensive sexuality education that I think needs to start at school, start in school, and school curriculum need to be revised because from the very base, there's still that portrayal of when we speak about gender. I mean, even some does not know the difference between sex and gender. So there's always that notion between male and female, women and men, that's all. So there's need to have a revision on comprehensive sexuality education in our system. And how do we learn from others? Because when we're speaking about acceptance in school settings, for example, first off, the students, the people need to understand what is the notion of sexuality, sexual diversity, gender. They need to understand that. So I think we need to start from there so that we can gradually make those steps. And then again, it comes to the ministries, the one who's responsible for educational institution. How do they incorporate comprehensive sexuality education to make it more representative and inclusive? Then, of course, we move to toilet, access to other services that comes after that was mentioned in the chat group. But of course, again, it comes to this cycle of society, societal attitude. How do we change the mindset? And again, it comes to awareness, it comes to education, it comes to understanding, ready to accept that there is a diverse population that we're living, and we accept that we are living in a community that when we speak about others or marginalized population, it's not about only people living with HIV or people with disability or people with albinism, women, children, but it's also about LGBTQIA plus community. So I think this part needs to be revised, and of course it comes with a lot of lobbying with policymakers, a lot of advocacy, a lot of campaigns with institutions, reporting, working with National Human Rights Institution, for example, to make them understand that in their annual report, they need to highlight those issues so that the government can take it up from there. But then as a final input, concluding remarks, I need to say that as we reflect on the 10 years of Resolution 275, we must acknowledge both the progress we've made and the challenges that remain, as has been very well highlighted by my other panelists in this conversation. Of course, the journey towards ensuring the right to safety for the community, especially refugee, is far from over, and we all agree with that, because there's already some challenges within the community. Now it comes to refugee, it comes to asylum seekers moving in, moving out, the issue of classism, racism, economic disparities. We have all these dynamics. So that's why we speak about intersectional approach. However, I think with continued advocacy, collaboration, and political will, we can of course build a safer and more inclusive Africa, where everyone, regardless of their SOGI, can live with dignity. I think that would be my remarks when so basically continued advocacy, having those kind of discussion, collaboration, partnership, political will is the way forward to try to address issue of LGBT person in refugee setting, which is very far from over, as we have been highlighted in this conversation. So thank you very much. I will leave it now to you, Busi, and I really appreciate all the inputs that we got from the participants, and we look forward to continued collaboration.
Thank you so much, Rakshita. Thank you so much for those remarks. We're now going to be moving on to Idu to do your closing remarks. Joe, okay, give me a second. Sorry, João, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, great. Okay, cool. Go.
Então, eu estava aqui a olhar os comentários dos outros painelistas e acho muito interessante, muito importante que nós, pessoas LGBTs, comecemos a ter em mente que essa ideia de tolerância até um certo ponto pode ser prejudicial para o nosso movimento.
So Edu is mentioning that he thinks it's interesting that this idea of tolerance for our people, for LGBT people, it can be harmful in a way.
Então, nós temos de ter a consciência que somos pessoas, que temos direitos e que devemos ser respeitados como pessoas, como cidadãos, e não estamos à procura de tolerância, não estamos à procura de um pouco de aceitação, mas sim que nossos direitos sejam reconhecidos pelos nossos estados e que sejamos incluídos nas nossas políticas públicas de segurança e mais.
And that we need to have our rights respected, and we want our countries to respect us. So we don't deserve just tolerance, but we need to be respected.
Sobre a questão da religião, estive aqui a ver, e eu acho que é extremamente importante que organizações LGBTs comecem também a desconstruir este cenário de que a religião não é um espaço que deva ser frequentado por pessoas LGBTs. Nós temos muitas pessoas que são LGBTs, mas que também são pessoas de fé.
And also to deconstruct the idea that religion is not a space for LGBT people, that we have a lot of LGBT people that have faith, and that religion is also their space.
E exemplo prático disso é que a 17 de maio, quando é comemorado o Dia Internacional contra a Homofobia, nós tivemos no nosso painel, no nosso evento, um bispo, um representante de uma igreja ali a falar sobre essas questões, sobre a importância de incluir as pessoas LGBTs, sobre principalmente essa ideia toda de amar o próximo, aceitar as pessoas LGBTs na igreja, sem a necessidade de querer mudar ou converter a sua orientação sexual ou identidade de gênero.
One example of that was that on May 17, one of the panelists of the event, Edu, was mentioning, was a bishop from a church talking about how the idea of loving one another, it can be also applied to our community and accepting one another.
Então, só esses comentários que eu tinha por finalizar, e aproveito a agradecer o convite. Foi sobre a importância de estar aqui e aprender sobre outras situações e sobre o que tem acontecido a nível dos direitos LGBTs a nível regional. Obrigado.
So I do want to thank for being here and to learn and to listen another experiences from another countries. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Edu. We'll now then go to our last panelist, which is Petrus. Over to you for closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Pusi. Just to comment to commend and appreciate all the participants for their comments and questions. And I think most of the input was really just comments to add to the discussion. And I would just like maybe to respond to one of the very good point raised as well with regard to how we can ensure that the new legislation does not, or new laws that are being passed in different countries within the region do not perpetuate further oppression and discrimination. And I think that's where we can all have an input, either through consultations when our respective legislatures are conducting consultations, if they make provision for that. It's the right opportunity for everyone involved in the work of protecting and advancing the right of LGBTQIA persons to really just scrutinize these bills, scrutinize these laws before they are passed into law, and just have their input and see whether they perpetuate any form of oppression and subjugation, and have an input there. And I think another way to also safeguard and ensure that these new laws do not perpetuate further violence or do not entrench any form of subjugation or oppression or discrimination is to also just identify those allies within the legislatures of respective countries to lobby and have an input through the lawmakers as well. Those are the ways that I think everyone that's working in that area can contribute and ensure that no new law perpetuates or entrench further oppression and subjugation as well. And also to just highlight, I'll come back again. It's the 10th anniversary of the Resolution 275, and I'll keep repeating that. The need to disseminate, the needs to create sensitization, the needs to make everyone aware Resolution 275 and the obligation that imposes upon states and individuals to promote and protect the rights of LGBTQI persons and to ensure that they are free from any form of violence and other forms of human rights violations as well. And also to highlight the role that traditional leaders, religious leaders can play in this struggle for the advancement and protection of LGBTQI plus persons. Religious leaders, traditional leaders, they can reach spaces where enforcement of resolutions, enforcement of laws cannot reach. They can change attitudes, they can change perception, they can preach tolerance, they can preach acceptance, they can preach respect more effectively, and through them more change and more positive developments can be observed beyond passing of new laws, decriminalization, and all other forms of progressive development. So it's very important to identify those leaders, and I think Monica has also alluded to that, and like Shita, with regards to the role they can play, identify those allies within religious settings and within those traditional settings to advance the cause of protecting and promoting the rights of LGBTQI persons. With that done, I say thank you very much. That is my concluding remarks. Over to you, Busi.
Thank you so much, Petrus, and thank you to all the panelists today and the engagement. It's been a very rich discussion. We have had some wonderful recommendations going forward. There's a lot of best practices that we can learn from one another. I think it's been an absolutely wonderful panel. Thank you so much to all those who have joined online and on the Zoom platform. The meeting is now closed. Thank you.